Thank you for listening to the Open Discourse podcast. I'm Charles Mitchell, co-founder and CEO of the Open Discourse Coalition. In this series, I interview thought leaders, elected officials, entrepreneurs, and other change agents. Today, I'm joined by the Honorable John Kennedy, former Pennsylvania State Representative, founder of Kennedy Railroad, and author of the memoir Back on Track. John, you brought me this article by Peggy Noonan. It's called A Separate Peace. It's from 2005, the year I graduated college, by the way. You can talk in a minute as to what you were doing in 2005, okay? And I remember, I was a graduate by then. It was September 2005, okay? So don't get mouthy yet. I remember reading this article at the time. I have not read it since. And I'm so taken with it now. I want to read a couple of paragraphs of it to you. And then I want you to talk about why this is so powerful in your life. So Peggy Noonan wrote, September 2005, our elites, our educated and successful professionals, are the ones who are supposed to dig us out and lead us. She goes on to say, she talks about the elites of our state capitals, the rich, the accomplished, etc. She says, I have a nagging sense, and I think I have accurately observed, that many of these people have made a separate peace, the title of the article. That they're living their lives and taking their pleasures and pursuing their agendas, that they're going forward each day with the knowledge which they hold more securely and with greater reason than non-elites, that the wheels are off the trolley and the trolley's off the tracks. Interesting metaphor for your life, John. Mm-hmm. And with a conviction, a certainty that there is nothing they can do about it. I suspect that history, including great historical novelists of the future, will look back and see that many of our elites simply decided to enjoy their lives while they waited for the next chapter of trouble, and that they, consciously or unconsciously, took grim comfort in this thought: I got mine, which is what the separate peace comes down to. I got mine, you get yours. John, I invited you on this podcast today because my observation is you have lived a different kind of life than the people that Peggy Noonan is talking about in those two paragraphs. Why is this so powerful to you, and why have you not chosen to make a separate peace?
Well, that's a beautiful question for a guy that's lived 88 years. The separate pieces, they leave our children with a system far different than one we inherited. And although they felt they were trying to defend it, they were actually using it for their own betterment. And in the end, they all had this little thought in the back of their minds, well, since I got mine, if everything goes kapooey, the money will be worth nothing, their children will not be free, and their real estate tenants won't pay the rent. So they're going to be back to square one with all the rest of us. And you ask, why didn't I buy into that? I actually don't know. I would have to say my mother, who did so much with so little and fought for the underdog and wouldn't take no for an answer. And so when I was elected in the legislature, I quickly saw waste, I saw hypocrisy, and I saw ineffective policy. And that bothered me. And so I didn't want to be I didn't want to start picking up crumbs and be dependent upon that lifestyle for my future. So somehow, innately, based on my childhood and my youth, in my life to date, it's almost like I've been cursed to care about this stuff.
Well, John, I deliberately asked that question of an 88-year-old guy who's lived a lot of history, so I'm glad you thought it was the right person to ask. I do want to ask you about that mama in Youngstown that you just talked about, but I think you were about to make another point before I started talking.
Well, the other point of why I didn't buy into it was connected to my employees.
Okay. And your employees were of what company, of which you had what role?
Well, I founded a railroad construction company in 1965, which meant I depended on brute, untrained, uneducated, hard labor to build a railroad track, mostly African-American men, that I learned to respect and love. And they worked very hard, cold, hot. And when I saw what we could afford as a small business, we could afford a measly health insurance, no pension at the time. So when you convert that into the state system, the delta was too much for me to bear. So I just decided that I would not touch. I didn't take any perks. I didn't use any perks, and I refused to take the pension because of them. You know, when they looked at their paychecks on Friday, they had a gross pay and a net, and buried in there in state tax is them. And so that allowed me to take the position that I'm just not going to do it. And thank God, because it has been the catalyst to create, or not so much to create, but to build the CAP program, which is now having quite an impact in other states.
So what you're referring to right there, John, is this piece of paper.
Yes.
This is your declination, of membership in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System when you served in the Pennsylvania State House in the 1980s, 81 to 85?
80 to 88.
80 to 88, 4 terms. When you served in the House of Representatives, you could have gotten yourself a government pension of the type that your employees at Kennedy Railroad could only dream, and you decided to sign this piece of paper. I'm interested to see, this was 1987. Your signature hasn't changed, so I'm impressed. You gave up really a golden parachute that most people, especially today, I mean, we've both worked in and around these issues for a long time. I don't know what the rules were when you were in there. My understanding of the rules today is if you had served 5 terms, not 4, but 5, and had not signed this piece of paper, you and your spouse would have essentially free health care for the rest of your life, in addition to a cash payment.
Oh yeah, free health care, which is now, I was told recently the premium for the health care for a retired lawmaker right now, which includes everything, is something like $2,500 a month. Think about that. Now
that's not what they pay. That's the cost.
That's the cost, but they pay 3%. So for like $300-400, they have a Cadillac for former member, spouse, and anyone under 21 at home.
Huh?
Forever. Now that's where you get the us and them. That's why people don't trust, don't like, and well, look at the polls. You have the political class, then you have us. It's us and them.
That's what Peggy Noonan was talking about.
She was talking about that 21 years ago.
That's prescient.
The us and thems.
And you at least had a conception of it in the 80s. I mean, there have been all these social movements since then, John. By the way, on the left and the right, Occupy Wall Street, Bernie Sanders, John Fetterman, Donald Trump, MAGA, Tea Party, all of it. And I think if you were to ask most people, this is another reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, I think most people would probably say, yeah, we think something started after the bailouts in 2008, the Tea Party, right? And now that has metamorphosed into what we see today, that anti-elite, us and them that you were talking about. And part of why I think your story is so worth telling, John, is what you're saying is, no, that's not true. This stuff has been building since at least the 1980s, when you became the Honorable John Kennedy.
It started in the story was told to me by former Speaker Matt Ryan, that when Shapp was governor, he held the legislature hostage. They ran out of money. They couldn't pay their staff, and he got what he wanted because they just couldn't fight back. So they decided that they would start building reserves. They started building the professional full-time legislature, which Pennsylvania probably stands out among all the states now. They were spending like $250, $300 million annually to run it, and stockpiling another $400 million to defend it. So now they have themselves a system that no longer it works for them, but it's not working for us.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that, John. One of the things I believe in on this little program is tough questions. So although people who know me probably could guess that I am inclined to agree with you on everything that you just said, if I didn't, what I would say is, well, it sounds good to say that a business guy like you should serve in elected office for a time and then go back to business and yada, yada, yada. But it doesn't actually work in practice. People don't want to do it. And we really need professionals. We need people who can make their lives being on the staff of a legislature, learn all the issues, understand what our Commonwealth, or our country really needs. And we need to make being a legislator a full-time job so that someone could afford to serve. Think about all the people out there who couldn't afford to do what you did, John. So what do you say to that objection to the system that you're speaking out against?
Well, it's a tough question and it demands a clear answer. I think we all need a change of heart. We don't have a political problem in America. We have a moral problem. I mean, the level of apathy in America far exceeds the knowledge of our history.
Peggy Noonan again.
And so, first of all, anyone who has ever served in any legislature, who's ever run for any public office, special. They're special people. They believe in themselves, and they want to do something with their life good. And I credit all D's, R's, I's, doesn't matter, left, right, doesn't matter. Whenever a civilian would attack a legislator, I defend the legislator first for the fact that they bonded on doors, raised money, licked envelopes, and got elected. Point one. Point two, once elected, if they get into leadership, they have to govern. Now, I didn't feel this way in 1988 when I left the legislature. That was 40-some years ago. Now I see they really do have to govern. And so people get caught in this. You and I both know a lot of well-intended men and women have gotten elected, turned sour, and became part of the problem they were trying to solve. And so because they have to actually govern, they have to cut deals. We've had some people that we spend millions of dollars getting elected to vote for really sloppy budgets. But so I feel that we need 51% of the elected body coming from private sector business owners who balance budgets, employed people, create tax. I don't propose that we dominate. I just say we participate enough that we need to bring our checkbook back in balance at local, state, and federal. We need to bring the country back in balance. And I don't suggest it's all going to be done by a capitalist, because we need the right capitalists, not just the capitalists to get elected. But I say we need some of these professionals balanced in with folks who come from my corner of the world. Does that make sense? It
does. So we're going to talk more about your corner of the world, John. Let's start with the corner of the world that you came from. I asked you however many minutes ago how you came to possess the convictions that you have, and you mentioned your mother. Share with our listeners. I'm sure that my experience is that people's families tend to listen to broadcasts like this. So maybe there are some things that your grandkids could learn about your mother, but also somebody who doesn't know you from, a hole in the wall. What should they know about that lady in Youngstown, Ohio?
Wow. Well, she was a farm girl from Pennsylvania.
We claim everything that's good about her if she came from Pennsylvania.
She came from Venango County, a farm girl. And my mother was, she was a living saint in the sense, but she wasn't a goody two-shoe. She would knock my head off, beat me like to a pulp at times. But I'll give you an example of what she did. Her husband had a drinking problem, and so she frowned on it. But when she heard the local new priest in the parish build a bar in the basement and stocked it and spent $9,000, she took him on, and she actually had to go and get 150 signatures in a petition.
Now, wait a minute, John. We got to make sure we unpack this for our listeners. So you're saying, first of all, You said your mother's husband. Your father was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
It's been a besetting sin in your family. I'm sure you'll have more to say about that.
Right.
And this priest built a bar where?
In the rectory. In the rectory, and spent, this is $1980, $82, spent $10,000 Leslie's. Anyway, I have a
And
picture.
your mother found out about it?
My mother found
And
out.
what
I
did
have
she-
a picture of it. I took a picture.
And what'd she do?
Well, she was a busybody at the church, and she was head of the Alder and Rosary Society. Well, she had a little meeting on a Friday night, and she invited this priest to speak to her little lady group. In the meantime, she had a friend in the diocese, in the controller's office, where she got receipts. So she had the receipts. So she confronted him, and she went to the bishop to find the procedure to get rid of him. And she had to get all these signatures. Not one man would sign the petition. But my sister told me she was knocking on doors in 2 feet of snow because she had a certain amount of time. But anyway, she ousted the priest. So you know, children learn what they live. And so when I got to the legislature, I did not have anything in mind. All I figured, small business could count.
Mm-hmm.
I could count.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like what. And then so I'm there for about a year. And Governor Thornburg was working on welfare reform. I learned a few things about the Catholic political end. I was a member of a Catholic parish in the district. I was the first Catholic elected that position in history since William Penn. And so I learned my position on welfare, they disagree with, and I always had a primary.
And what's your position on welfare,
Well,
John?
it was welfare reform. We're trying to kick able-bodied off welfare, and I was voting for it, and they didn't want me to vote for it.
So your stance was welfare is for those who cannot work.
Absolutely.
If you can work,
These
you
are
should
the
not be on
able-bodied. There
welfare.
was 97,000 able-bodied.
Did you ever expect the Catholic Church to square off against you
I
politically?
was dumbfounded.
So-
At the time, I didn't realize they had 3 full-time lobbyists. And at the end of my first term, I had a primary. Second, they always primary me.
and they were the ones behind it, you're saying, the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
So was your mother alive at that time?
She died. No, she died in '82.
Okay.
She died about that. But
I would have wanted to know what she had to say about those primary
we
opponents.
actually didn't talk much about it. But what I was driving at was where did this political reformation come from?
Yeah.
It came from we were holding meetings on welfare reform in the summertime. And I happened to notice the Republican chairman, we were in the minority at the time, I think. The Republican chairman of the committee was on vacation, yet his secretary would come in and sign for it. $88 a day per diem. No receipts. Now it's like that $190.
So for those who aren't from Pennsylvania, John, per diem in politics means they have a salary and benefits and all that, but they get an extra payment for expenses
Yes,
for showing up.
unaccountable expenses. No receipts. Tax-free.
So the chairman wasn't there. Chairman was a member of your party, and his assistant was...
Conservative Republican with the crucifix and the flags hanging on both lapels. But his secretary would come down and sign in for him like 2 or 3 days. And one day I asked this, Representative blah blah is not here, what's up? So why do you have to talk to him? So when we went back into session,
I bet you talked to him.
he walked up to me and put his finger on me. He said, "What's my per diem? Any business of yours?" You know what I saw? I saw my men building a railroad track out in the heat. That's what I saw. Now, all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute. We reform welfare, we reform insurance, we reform divorce. We need to reform ourselves. So that's where the whole idea is, wait a minute, something isn't right here. And we need to take a look at it. So that's where it started.
John, you traced a lot of that, I would call it fortitude, back to your mother.
Mm-hmm.
Fortitude's my word. In your words, what are the character virtues that you learned from your mother?
Do the right thing when nobody's looking, for sure. The usuals. Honesty, thoroughness, trustworthiness, those things.
Do you think those things are really usual?
Well, they seem to be the exception, or they used to be the rule. But again, she was born in 1911 and worked as a kid on a farm. They walked to church, walked to school. They were trained. They were hardened. Life hardened them. But those things still exist today. There's still a lot of wonderful people in America and the world who do the right thing, and they just need led. They need example. It's all about the example, and we don't have much of it in corporate. We don't have it even in the clerical life.
Was she that example for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Was she the glue that held your family together?
Pardon?
Was she the glue that held your family together?
Absolutely. She was everything. Yeah. Without my mother, we would have been big trouble because my dad was unable. And speaking to my father, I've lived long enough to forgive him because he was a victim. We're all victims of our DNA, our environment.
So say why, John, because I know you well enough to know you don't believe in making excuses for people. So why would you say your father was a victim?
Because he wasn't given the tools to live a productive life. He was spoiled. My grandmother had money. She doted upon him, and he didn't have skills. My great uncle offered to send him to Notre Dame and take a friend, and she wouldn't let him do it. So he didn't have the tools. Now, in life, you have to give your children tools, and he didn't have them. Plus, he had what I call it the Irish virus, the alcohol, and that just killed that. Not only killed him, but his father. It's been in the family forever. We addressed it in ours.
Well, we're going to talk about that. One more question about your descendants, John. I've been to your home in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, on many occasions. You have a portrait over your fireplace that's very meaningful to you. Can you share a little bit about who that guy is?
Oh, that guy. Well, his name was Patrick Kennedy, and he sailed from Ireland around 1845 with a dozen children. His nickname was Garibaldi. I have no idea, but my grandfather, his oldest son, was my grandfather Kennedy. He said if he should have been put in jail. He was a tyrant. He was illiterate. But somehow, he had the brains. When he got to the Mahoning Valley in 1860, was before they founded the ore process to build steel. But he ended up hauling slag out of the steel mills and building roads. And by 1900, his oldest son built the second highest building in town. How does an Irish Catholic guy get in the banking business in a WASP town in 1890? He had two sons, went to Notre Dame, graduated a school, the Kennedy School. And if you wonder about your DNA, my great uncle Patrick, he was a councilman. And he was the councilman on the north side where the WASP and the Jews lived. Now, power was local then. It wasn't in Columbus. So all these things that are in yours and mine and this young fellow over there all come from the bloodlines. So I didn't know. It was like 50 years lapse between a Kennedy employing anyone until I went into business. And then the politics came to me. Stuff happened to me that pulled me in. I couldn't resist because there was an opportunity to fix things. But it was all part of my ancestors. The guy, Garibaldi, hanging on the wall. Someone once said, a life well lived can be measured by how long does it take. Nobody talks about them. Well, here I am. He died. He died the day Lincoln was assassinated. He rolled over in his horse and buggy and killed. The day Lincoln was, here we are, that was in 1874 or something like that. And here we are in 2026 on a podcast talking about Patrick Kennedy. Yeah.
I'm happy for his memory to live on, John, as it should, and it should live on in generations
and I think,
of your
frankly,
family.
The business, what my sons are doing in my family, we're doing what they did 150 years ago.
And that's, I think, part of the story of your family that's so interesting, John, is you had Garibaldi, you had entrepreneurship, you had wealth, you had all the stuff. You also had the virus, and we'll get back to the virus, right?
So, word to the wise be sufficient. Keep your eye on the virus.
Yeah, and we're going to hit the virus, but part of the amazing story of your family is you had all that success, all that, and then lost it, and then had to rebuild everything, your entrepreneurship, but also your family and all of it. So, all right, you said we beat the virus. How did your family beat the virus?
Well, that is really a personal one for me. God arrived. I think God had a plan for me. It wasn't to drink myself to death, and so I never touched it. I saved my pennies. I didn't drink at all until I was maybe 28, 30 years old.
Is that because you knew what had happened in prior generations of your family?
My instinct was I was not going to be poor.
I see.
Period. I wasn't going to have...
That's a good instinct.
I wasn't going to have snow tires on the front of my car in cars that didn't start. So I made up my mind that somehow I was going to get rich, I guess, in life. And so I didn't drink, but by the time I was 50, it had me. But I got sick. If I hadn't got sick, I'd have been another dead drunk, and my children would have probably carried on the same bad habits. But it was getting sick, and that had nothing to do with my decision. My doctor saved my life when he said this. John, he said to me, your liver's gone pretty much, and your lungs need some work. He said, if you don't quit drinking today, if you quit drinking today, you might live. And if you don't, get a new doctor. I'm not going to watch this. And I said, did you say might live? He said, that's exactly what I said. Wow. You talk about having the dunk scared out of you? Yeah, he scared the living dunk out of me.
How many years ago was that, John?
That was 38 years. That was October 10th. 10/10/88. And so my first sojourn out of the hospital, after getting the life sentence of no more drink, I took my youngest son to the Notre Dame football game. I had never been there. Well, everybody drinks, and oh my God. By the time I got home, I said, if I got through that, I'm going to beat this. But anyway, it was a complete game changer for me and my family and the business. We saved the company, and so I wouldn't be sitting here if God arrived and said, I got a plan for you. And so there were other pieces of that plan that I wasn't aware of that were coming my way, like CAP and a few other things. So to say that Mark Twain once said, I'd rather be lucky than good. That's me.
And John, if I understand the story right, that day, 10/10/88, it didn't just affect you, because the virus, as you put it, is often transmitted through generations. It was transmitted, unfortunately, through the generations to you, but it has stopped with you in the Kennedy family.
Well, it's such a powerful, baffling disease that I have 5 children. 3 of them are recovering alcoholics. You'd think they would have learned something, watching their father almost destroy himself, almost destroy his business, family. No, it's a powerful weapon. And so right now I consider and say we have 6 recovering alcoholics in our family, and as well as other people that we've helped. I never met an alcoholic I didn't like. In fact, when I quit drinking, I'd go to bars and eat because there's something about it's a baffling, powerful disease. And so,
did your decision transmit to your children, or did they have to have their own 10/10/88 after that?
They had to have their own.
I think that's how it works.
I never preached the word of. I never went like the old prostitute gone straight. No, I thought that would be counterproductive. I just kind of kept it to myself. Children learn what they live, not what they're told. No, they just grab certain things.
John,
so we are now a sober Kennedy family.
It's amazing.
And we're building. We're builders now. And we're protectors. We're trying to defend our way of life and the freedoms in capitalism, which is a really soft, tender spot for me.
two things I want to unpack from what you just said. One, I want to talk more about the system that you're defending. So we really need to flesh out why you think that system is worth defending and what that looks like. We'll get to that in a minute. But before that, you talked about your children, your family, etc. Why are you so proud of your children?
Let me count the ways. They're good to each other. They respect and they honor each other. And most are self-employed. You know, self-employment isn't for everyone. But the beauty of self-employment is that you meet someone you would have never met. You grow in different directions as you command management of your base business. Opportunities and things come, people come into your life, and you open up like a tree. And so, the beauty of watching. They're very kind to others. They do a lot of things for people that no one knows. And to see that is almost, it's like watching my mother reincarnated, because she was a doer. And she was always helping others. Meals on Wheels and this, that, and the other thing, you know. She took people to, she just did for others. And so I think that's the nicest. And the mother was a great mother. It's not, you know, there's two sides of that equation. There's, you know, but I'm lucky. Rather be lucky than good.
You're very lucky, John. Some would say you're blessed. We'll get in 1 second to entrepreneurship in our system. There's one person you haven't named yet in our discussion who, like Garibaldi, deserves to be remembered. Introduce our listeners to that lovely lady, Bernadette.
Well, Bernadette, we were high school sweethearts back in Youngstown, Ohio. She was a freshman and I was a junior when we met. And the reason we met is I'd flunked everything. I was booted out of Catholic high school in my freshman year for misbehaving. So I ended up in a public school. I'd never been in a public school before. And they weren't as clean as the Catholic school, to tell you the truth. And so I had to go make up all these credits. And so I'm a junior. I walk into a freshman class, and I spotted Bernadette. She was a cute little girl. And she said afterwards to her girlfriend, Irene, "Who's that new boy in our class? I'd like to know him." And Irene said, "You don't want to know him. He was kicked out of Urson High School." And she said, "I think I do." So anyway, we were sweethearts. And I back in the 50s, a sweetheart was you held hands, you drank tea. On Saturday nights, you watched The Honeymooners on television, and you were out there at 9 o'clock. That was it. But anyway, 45 years later, well, I was allowed to take her to Mass on Sunday, Easter Sunday. Mm. And on Easter Sunday, 1955, I saved my pennies and bought myself a pair of black and white Oxford shoes. 45 years later, I ordered a pair through the mail. I came home from work, and there they were, and I opened them up. It was Good Friday. I said, "Geez, I haven't had a pair of these. I wonder what happened to Bernadette." I knew that I heard her husband died. Anyway, I called. We ended up meeting after 45 years, and we were married. The first word I uttered in this century, once the bell rang at 2000, I said, "Would you marry me?" And she said, "I'll have to think about it." She had 1 second. But anyway, she passed here in March, and she was wonderful. Yeah, we had a great life together, and my children, we just had a great life.
So in that great life, John, you're very focused on defending our free market system and on rallying people who have been blessed by this country the way that you have to do something about it. So let's unpack that. Why 88 years of eyewitness testimony? Why is the capitalistic free market system worth defending? Or I'll ask it another way. Why aren't all the critics, Mayor Mamdani, and others, why aren't they right that this system is just thievery by rich people?
Well, it's not perfect. And there's been a lot of dictators and there's been a lot of empires, but they all crumbled because it was one man rule. But I think the beauty of capitalism is that your effort and your performance impacts others. You raise the level of your lifestyle among everybody. Everybody benefits from one person's leadership. But beyond that, there's nothing. There's the exaltation of the feeling of growing an enterprise from nothing. You experience it with the school, from an idea to an instinct to action, and then saving your pennies, and you create a company, and you look back 10 or 20. I was on the way up here. I was driving up here. I drove by the Enola Yards, and I saw a railroad truck with ties, and it's an American Track. That's a derivative of the company that I started out of I remember I had a little saw box. It was my office. Remember, you could put your saw in the box? I saw it out of a little box. But it's beautiful. In addition to the economic rewards, and you go from coal furnaces to air conditioning. I mean, I'm the luckiest generation. I'm not the greatest, the luckiest. Born in 38, no depression, no wars. The 50s was up and away. I like Ike. How lucky was I? And then to get into business and to grow in different ways, but it needs defense. It's under attack. Never before in the history of our country are the men and women making payrolls needed to step up and serve on school boards, borough councils, township supervisors, everything in between to Congress and White House. Now, I'm not saying capitalists should rule. I'm saying they should participate. We have to have the right capitalists, not just the capitalists. So to do it is right now yearning, screeching, hollering for the men and women who create balanced budgets, create jobs taxes to come and serve for a while. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a proud heritage of that in our country. You look at George Washington and the rest of the founding generation, and I, as somebody who, as you know, has a decent number of friends who are in business and so forth, it's part of why, going back to Peggy Noonan.
I love what Ted Kennedy. I don't love it. What Ted Kennedy said. I'm not going to be around when the whole bottom falls out because you cannot continue to live on credit cards and leave this country, our kids' bills they can never pay. I had a member of my own family who was a pretty far left guy, big Obama fan. Every time I'd go to his house, he'd put Obama's picture on the refrigerator just to haunt me, and I wouldn't take the bait. So one day I had enough of it, and I said to him, well, do you have a 6-foot rule? He says, yeah, why? I said, just, if you have a tape, bring. So you're in the garage, brother. I opened up his kitchen door, and I measured from the face of the brick to the face of the wall. It was 9 inches, the jamb. I closed the hand, he said, what are you doing? I said, well, in your house here, you set your thermostat where it belongs. You balance your checkbook every month, and you don't pay any interest on your credit card. You're a fiscal conservative. But 9 inches outside the door, you buy into a party that's all about what's in it for me. Now there's both parties. Now it's not just one party; it's both parties.
It is.
It's both. So the elite political class are living it up, doing well, writing books and getting endorsements and all this, that, and the other thing. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, I got cousins that still clip coupons, and work 2 jobs.
Yeah. And Peggy Noonan does talk about the the political class in that article, John, but I think the argument that you're making now at the age of 88, yes, is in part about the political class, but it's about the entrepreneurial class. It's about the capitalist class, because you're saying they shouldn't just get theirs. They shouldn't say, well, I have my country club membership. You live right by a country club and you see the golf carts going by. You're saying they need to preserve the system for everybody else.
Well, over there on that table, I showed you that picture of me standing at Normandy. When Cornelius Ryan wrote The Longest Day, D-Day, my father had told me about his cousin. His name was Francis Xavier O'Mahony, slightly Irish, 19-year-old Marine, was one of the first 100 soldiers killed on Omaha Beach. And my father died, so I never knew anything about him, except he was from Mercer, PA. So Bernadette and I, we went to spend a few days on the Normandy Beach, and I stood there at that cemetery. By the way, they had moved his body back to Mercer in 1952. But when you go there, if you've read anything about Point to Hawk, in fact, CPR, the book that we're working on, I dedicated to the man who led it. He was handpicked by Eisenhower. He was from Texas, 33-year-old Marine colonel, who led the 300 Allied troops. They were Rangers up a 120-foot cliff. 90 survived. And that turned the war. But that whole dynamic there is that they gave me 8 decades. They gave me the opportunity to start a business, to be free to do it, and everybody else who's done the same thing, no matter to what, whether you're Donald Trump or Bezos or Joe Blow down the street with a plumbing company. If you seek opportunity, abandoning security, that's what needs to be defended right now.
Well, John, I respect a man who's working on his second book at the age of 88. You referenced that CPR stands for Capitalists Please Rise. So if people hear this interview and they want to hear more from the Honorable John Kennedy, they can get that. Your first book is called Back on Track, right? Pun intended. And that's available on Amazon. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. It looks like you were about to say something else, John.
No, when you mentioned CPR, I just have to laugh because of where it came from. Again, politics came to me. Mm-hmm. I was confronted in my accountant called me in 1975 and said, John, tell me how much money you're going to make next year because you have to prepay your corporate net income tax. I thought he was drinking. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, the legislature passed. I said, what's the legislature? Now I'm like 29 years old. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah, that is not unique among 20-something entrepreneurs or 30 or 40 or 50-something.
I said, well, I ended up having to run there. I said, well, I'm not going to put up with that. So that's how I ended up. So anyway, it's about something comes into your heart and your head, and you have an idea. So I'm watching television at the end of COVID was just about winding down, but meanwhile, the president of the American Federation of Teachers was in the White House, in the Oval Office, writing specifications on when schools would close and open. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, how many? I think I checked, there were like 2.5 million members of the union, government union. And I checked this, Americans have 33 million employers. Small business, not corporate. 33 million employed. They employ 66 million. That's 100 million. And then they have spouses and under 20. So about 120 million Americans have to do it right every day, producing taxes and jobs, and they have no leverage. You know why? Because they haven't worked to develop it. And so I'm thinking to myself, this may be the time for capitalists to have to rise up. So another thought hit me. I said, well, capitalists, please rise. And then I said, CPR. We save 250,000 lives a year with CPR. So that's the CPR concept came into my head, through my heart. And so that was a few years ago. So now we have the first draft done. We're going to be launching in January of 2027 because the whole purpose of CPR is to inspire, not to condemn, but to inspire men and women who had the privilege and honor and freedom to seek opportunity, abandon security, create taxes and jobs. They need to set the policy. There has to be a complete reset in America. And it has to happen like right now, not next year, now. So it's our hope that we can do. Now with Citizens Alliance, we're spread across. We're doing work in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, North Dakota, and Idaho, and Pennsylvania. We're spreading our wings, and so we'll be able to get this out there to every. If we had a magic wand, and Musk or one of these guys sent us a big check, we could fire that off to 100 million people. I'm going to guarantee you're going to have new faces elected by 2028.
Well, John, I don't think you knew it when you rolled into the state capitol in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 1981, but clearly God called you to start a movement, and that's what you're working on now in your 88th year. I have a few other questions for you. One is this piece of paper we've been talking about. What did it cost you? I'm sure that you know.
More than little and less than a lot. No, that's not right. It didn't cost. Well, I could have benefited I guess I could have put money in my own pocket. I mean, if you take 400, I've been out of there about 480 months. It may be 3,000 a month. That's $1.2 million. 480 months of health, it's over $2 million. It's a lot of money.
I think that's a real statement, John, and I know you wouldn't have talked about it unless I asked you, and that's why I asked you, because it's one thing to call people to action. It's another thing to say, I've put something in.
Well,
and not just your time, and not just your passion, and not just your words in these books. That's a real commitment that I would hazard to say most people would not have made. And I know that's not speculation, because we can look at all the people who have served in elected office since the 1980s. Very few people make that decision.
I have press releases on my briefcase where one man was you get $26,000 a month in pension. And plus, I mean, they become. How do you build wealth in a nonprofit environment? It's just, but if you want to get back to me, it's like, it goes back to my mother. To set the example, to do without. I have no doubt that if this country is 50 years from now is still back on track, it will be because of what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And there's just something about Pennsylvania too. You know, remember you and I went to Carpenter's Hall, and that changed the whole dynamic of our movement. That one event, right in the same room where the Revolutionary War was decided upon.
I am still in your debt that you invited me into that room, John.
But think about it. You think about it, so that for me to say no to that, it just came instinctively. It wasn't something I talked about because, you know. But when it's time to talk about it, because it's real.
Yep.
And when I go to very wealthy men to help support us, sometimes I play that card. I say, match me. So what are you talking about? I pull that. I say, well, here's a couple. You know, I'll throw the numbers around because I'm not ashamed to do that now. But you know, it's funny how it all works out. When I walked out of the State House in December of 1988, I don't think I went back there I wanted nothing to do with that place. I was done with it. How did I know I'd be here? Because I was pre-programmed to coming from Pennsylvania. This is where it all started, and this is we're going to restart right here in Pennsylvania. So that was the best investment I ever made.
I like that summary, John. Best investment you ever made. Well, as you know, there are some trademark questions that I like to ask everybody who appears on this little program. So I would love to ask them of you. It's always fascinating to hear what folks have to say. your favorite world historical figure. Who is that person for you?
No doubt Thomas Jefferson, because he was a student. He was a student of ancient history. I wouldn't blink. Thomas Jefferson would be the one that Patrick Henry always knew he could talk. He could sell white to rice, but he wasn't a critical thinker like Thomas Jefferson was, and plus he was in a way he was a very humble man. If you've been to Monticello, on his tombstone, he was the founder of the University of Virginia. Of all the things he was that. So I could say Ben Franklin, but no, Thomas Jefferson.
Well, I know it must really mean something to you for you to give props to a guy from Virginia instead of Pennsylvania or Ohio. So.
Yeah.
John, last question. You've always given me a lot of good advice, and I find our conversations are always reflective in a really helpful way. So this is a reflective, advice-oriented question for you. Thinking back on your life, what's the most influential advice you ever received?
Well, a lot of different ones, but I'll have to pick one. A friend of mine who was 11 years older than me, he actually indirectly brought me to Harrisburg, indirectly. When I was upside down in life, my business was hanging by its toenails and I was still drinking. He said to me one night, he said, "John, I don't know how you ride two horses." I was in the legislation, but he said, "I pick one horse. I don't pick him to win, place, or show. I pick him to win." So you got to think about trying to get on one horse and ride it, which I'm doing right now with CA and CPR. I ride one horse and having it. So it was advice I got a little bit too late, but I had to work out of it. But once I got back on track, then I picked one horse. Yeah, that was the best advice.
Great advice and a good horse. John, thanks so much for a delightful conversation as always, and I hope one that is, and I expect one not just fun for us, but one that is of value to the systems that you're seeking to protect and maybe even to generations to come of that very intriguing family that you've taken the time to describe today.
Well, thank you, Charles, for not only this, but for all you've done for others in your pursuit and the effect you've had on my life as well. Thank you very much.
My great honor. Thanks again for listening to the Open Discourse podcast. This podcast is brought to you through the generosity of the Shearer Group of Companies in State College, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to keep it going, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and consider making a donation at opendiscoursecoalition.org/donate. See you next week.